I have been trying to eliminate my yarn stash now for nearly 2 years. And while that sounds like a long time, when I originally added everything up, I estimated it would take me 5 years to get through it all. But I've gotten to the point now where I've started to lose track of things. I've got lots of leftover odds and ends. I've also fallen off the yarn buying ban a little bit and I've bought more yarn. So it's time for a reset. Today I'm going to get everything out, count everything up again, and see where we actually stand. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to eliminate my yarn stash in the first place is because I don't have a lot of space. And while it is now able to fit in 2 plastic boxes, they're really difficult for me to get down, and I'd much rather they would fit in a box under the bed if I could just slide it in and out, because as you will see, this is a bit of a palaver for me. That's the easy one. Oh no, 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 oh no. Okay. It's okay, breathe. We did it. So just like the last time we did this, I am counting my stash in 50-gram balls of wool, and that's just because that's what I typically tend to buy the most of. So I will count up how many complete balls of wool I have, and then I will add up how much my odds and ends weigh, and then divide that number by 50 to see approximately how many balls of wool that's equal to. I'll do the same thing with the yarn cones. I'll weigh the cone, see how much is on there, and then divide it by 50 to see how many equivalent balls of wool it would be. Time to get started. Okay, so I've got sort of a system here. These are my works in progress. Yes, I cut my finger yesterday, not happy about it. In the middle, we've got all the full skeins. So these ones at the front are ones that are from the original stash, I think. And the ones at the back here are recent acquisitions. And then in the boxes is scraps. I found some yarn in the wardrobe I'd forgotten about, which is this British Naturals and this Wendy that I've been meaning to dye for like, oh god, so long, too long now. But I've counted them up and I think I have 41 and a half, because these are an ounce, so we're rounding a bit, complete balls of wool left over from the original stash. I have included the paint box in that, but if you remember the saga of making this blanket, I did have to buy more. But it's too complicated, so I'm just putting it in this category. In terms of the new acquisitions, I'm not even kidding when I say most of it I've bought in the last few months. So I have 10 skeins of this West Yorkshire Spinners DK Elements, which I have a plan for and I'm hoping to get onto once I finish my current knitting project. I have the 5 balls of wool from the Victorian shawl that went wrong. I have 1 from the Daisy blouse, which is kind of in the work in progress pile, but I haven't cracked into this one yet, so it's going in the stash for now. And then all of these were a birthday present. I can't remember if they were in the original stash or not. I don't think they're in my Ravelry stash, which suggests they weren't. All of those I've bought in the last few months, and they're all 100-gram skeins, so that means it's 2 50-gram balls of wool. So I have 34 of those, including the one for the Daisy blouse. And yes, I'm collecting up the random materials I find around my room, just like last time as well. So now it's on to the weighing marathon. So I realised the easiest way to do this is actually to update my Ravelry as well, because I'm never going to remember all these quantities, which means it's going to be quite a slow process. Let's start with these. Welcome to day 2. I overdid it yesterday and I had to take a break, but I'm back at it at a gentler pace, and I've added everything up. I reckon I have 47¼ balls of oddments, 42 full skeins left from my original stash, and 34 new skeins I've bought since, for a total of 123¼ skeins of yarn. And my estimate from the running total, the last count, which includes some things you haven't seen, was 131.5. So I'm not that far off, but I am glad it's less than I expected and not more. Don't know where some of the other things have gone, but oh well. And looking through this, I've come to realise a couple of things about my stash. Some of the odds and ends in here, I've realised I don't want to knit up because I'm saving them for mending. For example, yes, I have a full 50-gram ball of this yarn that I used to make this cardigan, but I also have this little oddment. It's much more useful to use this oddment for ending than to crack into a new ball. And because it's got quite a delicate lace pattern, I anticipate the elbows will go at some point, and so I want to hold on to that yarn so that I can mend it in the future. So I don't think I should count it in my stash. Do you see what I mean? It's not to be used up. Yes, I'm holding on to it, but I'm never going to incorporate it into a future project because I'm saving it deliberately for the purpose of mending. But I also have some things that I'm just going to donate. For example, these. These are double knit. Not that interested in working with double knit. And they're a very toothy, natural British wool from Woolly Knits. And I've been saving it thinking I might do something Victorian with it, you know, knit a Victorian shawl with it or try and make a petticoat or something, because there is quite a lot of it here. But I've had it for nearly 5 years now and I haven't gotten around to it. So that concept, that project obviously isn't working for me, or it might be I just don't want to use this yarn. And it was very cheap. I got it in a like COVID sale. So maybe it's 4 years and not 5 years. But anyway, I paid like a couple of quid for it. A lot of people have said to me like, why don't you just donate the yarn? You know, sunk cost fallacy or whatever. You've already paid for it. That money's already gone. Who cares? But that's the thing. I can't afford to buy more yarn. So what's the point of me donating things I could knit when I can't afford to buy more yarn to knit with? So that idea of, well, the money's already spent has never really worked for me in my stash busting journey. But because I know I got a deal on this, I don't feel as bad about donating it. I also know locally to me, we have a craft charity shop and it's for like a local independent hospice that I already regularly support. So I can afford to make that kind of donation and be fine with it. And that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 skeins of yarn out of my stash. Some other things I want to get rid of. You might recognise the cursed cotton, crochet cotton, from when I tried to make several things with it and it just wasn't working for me. I'm just going to get rid of it. I have other crochet cotton so that if I want to do a crochet cotton project, I could use. I've also got this one, which I've never used because it's too thick, or I think I got this in a charity shop for a couple of quid and I don't know what weight it is. And a lot of the vintage cotton crochet projects I want to do, you have to know the gauge is important and the gauge of the thread is important. And because I don't know what it is and I don't know enough about crochet cotton to figure it out, it's going. You might remember I made all these crochet stars that I don't like, and they've just sort of sat in the box, and I've sort of kept them with the idea that I'll frog them and reuse the yarn for something. I do really like this yarn. It's so pretty. What am I going to do with this though? At this point it's just clutter and I do not have the space in my life for knickknacks. You'll probably tell I'm sort of a very minimalist person when I decorate because I've moved house too many times and I'm traumatised basically. So what am I going to do with these? I don't know. Maybe I'll donate these too, but they need to go, and then I'm not counting them in the stash at the very least. I've just realised I haven't included my crewel embroidery wool, but there's probably 50 grams of it there, so let's just say it's 124. Oh, it's 114¼ now, because I've gotten rid of 10. The crochet cotton was never counted in the original tally, it was only knitting yarns, so nothing comes off the stash total for that. But again, things like this I used to make the green version of jacket 487 that you see me wear a lot, and one of the seams is split, and I keep meaning to mend it. And I need a little bit of yarn for that. So I'm just going to keep this little bit of yarn and put it in. I'm going to make like a mending odds and ends bag. Very 1940s of me. Oh yes, the other thing I want to donate is my leftover paint box cotton. I might keep some odds and ends for mending the blanket, but the full skeins I think I'm just going to donate because I don't want to use this again. Every time I pick it up, I'm taken back to knitting that project, and the feel of it, it's so unpleasant to me. I just know I'm not going to make another project with this. So that's another 4. So then we're down to 110. As part of my system, works in progress yarn is not counted in the stash. One of the things I'm working on is the ranunculus, which is using that big cone of blue yarn I bought, which was 500 grams, 10 balls of wool. So that's probably where some of it's gone, but I'm just not going to count that off the stash now when I finish with it, because I haven't counted it in the new tally. Does that make sense? So 10 balls of wool gone, kind of. I'm undecided about this, the Naturally Soft sock, because I did consider making a cardigan out of it. I just don't know whether I'm going to have enough. And I also am not sure whether I want a cardigan this colour. But it is sock yarn, so I could knit a whole load of socks with it. I know I've sort of been saving it in the hope that I might be able to use it on my knitting machine, but I haven't been able to get my knitting machine working yet. Well, it works, it's just too difficult for me to operate, it's too stiff, so I need to take everything apart and try and oil it up, which is a big job. So will I be glad I've held on to this? Because I'm gonna have to do a lot of experimenting. You also need a lot of waste yarn when you do machine knitting. So I've taught myself into keeping it. But one of the things I have learnt about myself is that a lot of, like this blue yarn, I've had a project in mind for all this, which is sort of, it's vintage 4-ply. I don't know how old it is. It was in 50 grams, so it's probably like from the 70s. But I've been wanting to make a pair of World War II service stockings from it, which I have a pattern for ages, and I haven't done it simply because it's in skein form and I need to wind it up. And I have realised with my like energy limitations, if you like, I need the lowest barrier to entry as possible. If the pattern for something is in the box under my bed, I'm not going to do it. If the yarn is on top of the wardrobe and I'm not well enough to get it down, it's not going to happen. You see what I mean? So I need to skein up, I need to wind up these skeins so that they're ready to go, and then they might actually get used finally after however long I've had them. 2 years of stash busting at least. So there is something else I want to donate. What did I say we were up to? 110? So these alpaca that I used for my emotional support duck, I did knit my shawl for an art lover shawl from them, and I do really like that shawl. But knitting with this yarn is not pleasant, and doing the emotional support duck reminded me of that, so I'm going to get rid of this. I bought it because it was cheap in a charity shop and 2-ply is hard to come by, so again I don't feel bad about donating this one because I already bought it secondhand. I have used it, somebody else can make use of it now. One of the other things I've considered is a lot of the things in my stash are true vintage, original vintage yarns that I have been keeping, not so much because I want to use them, but as sort of like for archive reasons. I don't really know, but I just don't think I'm ever going to use them because, or maybe not all of them, because for me they're so useful to have as a record. I take them with me when I do talks. I occasionally give talks about vintage knitting so that people can see what the original yarn was like. So is this stash I want to bust? Not really. I'm kind of saving it deliberately. So should it be counted in the stash busting total? I think I'm letting myself save this. I'm letting myself hoard this. Maybe I'll change my mind and I might use some of it, but that conveniently is 4 skeins of yarn that I can take off the total, which leaves us at 125. And if you remember, my goal all along was to try and get below 100 with the stash. I don't think we're going to get there today because I don't think there is anything else I actually want to get rid of. But that's a lot closer. That's a lot closer and feels a lot more manageable to me now than it has done for a very long time. Oh, the other thing, this, which I've had the die to dye since I made that stash busting video, and I've never gotten around to it. And I've been trying to think about what has been stopping me doing this. For everything, what has been stopping me making this project I have in mind? What has been stopping me using this yarn? And again, this is partly because this needs unwinding into skeins for me to dye it. It has also been a case of dyeing is very energy intensive, as in personal energy intensive. It requires space, which I don't have, which means I'll have to do it in the garden, which means it requires good weather. And the like overlap of all those things has meant I've never gotten on with this dyeing project. But yarn dyeing is something I want to do for Claude Tries New Things. So this would be a really good place to start, and I don't have to buy anything else. So I think I'm also going to go and unskein this when I take everything else downstairs to wind up, which is at least 15 skeins. More than that, 20? Oh God. Okay, here we go. Why did I think I could film this video in one day? That was daft of me. Anyway, I have finally wound everything up. I was winding yarn for nearly 2 hours. Why did I do that to myself? Anyway, I've had a break and a rest and a whole weekend to recover, so I thought I'd talk you through my plans for some of the wound up yarn. So first of all, for this, oh, it's already unraveling. For my vintage navy blue, this was a nightmare to wind up. What is going on? How has they gotten this tangled? For this vintage navy blue, it got a lot easier to wind once I realised that the skeins I had were actually 2 skeins tied together. So I've essentially got 2 25-gram balls out of each 50-gram skein. Out of this, I want to make these 1940s service stockings. I have made 1940s stockings before, but they were in the round, and these stockings are knit flat. And you know, I'm a sucker for anything with unusual construction. Number 13 needles I've just seen. Oof. Okay. But the stockings I've made before were lacy stockings, and these are service stockings. They were designed to be worn by women in the forces during World War II. So women were allowed to hold non-military, non-combat positions in World War II in Britain. So you had, they were known as the WAFs in the Air Force and the Wrens. I don't know what they were called in the army, now I think about it. And obviously they needed uniforms, which were in short supply, and wool was rationed, apart from service yarn. So there was this scheme. So individuals and organisations could apply to the Board of Trade for service yarn, and this was yarn specifically made and dedicated to the production of items for the forces. So the government would send them the yarn, they would knit things from patterns like this that were produced to a regulation, and they would be sent back to the government, and then they would be sent on to the forces. Alternatively, I suppose if you knew somebody in the forces, like if you yourself were a Wren and your mum knit you your own stockings with the service yarn, I guess that was probably fine. As wool was incredibly hard to come by, I imagine quite a lot of sort of
I don't want to call it fraud, but I'm going to call it pilfering went on. So, you know, you were like, oh, what a shame. I've gone wrong on these stockings. I'll just have to, that ounce worth of yarn. No, it's not usable for service stockings. Sorry, government. I imagine a little bit of that went on. And the other thing about service yarns were, I've spoken to a lot of people who were alive during the post-war period, and they remember for a long time, while clothing rationing, because clothing rationing lasted until 1949 in Britain, even into the 1950s, the only yarn you could get was still in service colours. So you could only get like black and navy blue and I guess khaki green, maybe grey, I don't know. So it's such an interesting era of history. So I've always wanted to make a 1940s version or one of these patterns because I find it such an interesting phenomenon that suddenly this untapped pool of labour that is typically not valued, which is in this era women at home crafting for their families, is suddenly drawn upon by the government for free, and it's willingly given in a national emergency. I mean, I've done it because I made scrubs for free. I even bought the fabric myself and donated them when COVID happened. So it was very much a sort of goodwill, but I am curious to make some of them and see, firstly, how difficult they are or easy to follow, because as we know, 1940s knitting patterns can be a bit hit and miss. But also I want to understand sort of the volume of labour that was being asked of these women, as it was usually women in this time. Not exclusively, but usually. So that is my plan for all of this. And service yarn, unlike a lot of the patterns for jumpers and cardigans and things that we see, was 4-ply, whereas those tend to be 3-ply. So this is 4-ply yarn, the pattern calls for 4-ply, so hopefully everything should line up. I do wonder, that's another thing I've always been curious about, if home knitters were used to using 3-ply, why did they choose 4-ply for all the service knits? Was it a case of it would be considered more hard wearing? Because 3-ply would go a lot further in terms of rationing. So there was a logic there that somebody must have made a decision about, and I'd like to know their thinking. I doubt I ever will, but I can hypothesise at least. In terms of other 1940s things I want to make, in terms of stash busting odds and ends patterns, I don't have that many. I've got like Fair Isle ones, and I've got a couple of specifically for oddments ones. And one of them is for tea cozies. And I don't know if you've been watching Engineering Knits series about Call the Midwife knits. I'm loving it. I absolutely love that show. And she talks about the Call the Midwife tea cozy, and it's sort of like a Easter egg within the series about, oh, look at the tea cozy, sort of thing. And I've wanted to make one. I have made, when I first started knitting many years ago, tea cozies was one of the things I made a lot of. Goodness knows what I did with them all. I think I gave them to people. What a gift to get. I'm sorry if you ever received a knitted tea cozy from me as a gift. But anyway, I want to make one for myself this time, and I have this pattern which is for one in the style of a cottage, which I think is so adorable, and it's very much like an English thatched roof cottage. And then they have this one which is supposedly lantern style. I don't know what makes it lantern style. I guess maybe like the light is supposed to come out between the bars. But I think that's the one I'm going to make because I reckon I have the yarn left to make that. So you need approximately half an ounce. So half an ounce would be 14 grams. 3-ply in each of the following colours: brown, yellow, rust, turquoise, or any other colours available. And I like that idea of just sort of using what you have to make a little tea cozy. Don't even know if I have a teapot because I'm a Yorkshire gal, in the mug, bish bash bosh. I'm not that fussed about it brewing in a pot. Delightful cozies knitted from oddments. Oh, so charming. So maybe I'll make the cottage as well if I've got enough of that, but that you need more of specific colours, like you need a cream and you need a brown, and it's got to look like a house, and all of the detail is just embroidered on. So that's a bit of a faff. I might start with this one and see how I feel. Now, you will have seen me talk about this next lot of yarns in one of my shorts, but I appreciate not everybody will have seen that. So these I bought to make hexie puffs, and I broke my stash busting ban because I don't tend to buy a lot of these hand-dyed brightly coloured ones, but I've been making the hexie puff out of the very few oddments I have left of that type of yarn. I don't have any more of that type of yarn, but I want to make more hexie puffs. So what I did was I went on Ravelry to a de-stash forum and I shopped from somebody else's stash. So these were all sort of single skeins that somebody was getting rid of. I think I paid like £12 each, which, I mean, hand-dyed yarn in my local yarn shop can be as much as £24 a skein. So I got myself a bargain. But yeah, about 50 quid's worth of yarn there. But I am really pleased with the selection of colours I've got, because a lot of the colours in the Hexie Puff blanket are quite dark and I wanted some lighter ones. But yeah, I just wanted some bright colours and some hand-dyed yarns, because while I wouldn't wear anything made from these yarns, I do like them. There is something really beautiful about them. So I'm hoping to put them to good use with my Hexie Puffs. I've got so many other projects on the go at the minute, I don't know whether I will actually get to making Hexie Puffs, and some of these are so beautiful, and there's 100 grams of them, and a Hexie Puff takes like 5 grams. So I don't know whether I'm going to make like 20 Hexie Puffs out of each of these, or whether I should use sort of like half this, maybe I should like knit some socks and then use the oddments. I don't know how I feel, because I don't have enough of any of the other yarns to repeat a flower. So my sort of design for my Hexie Puff blanket is based on a grandmother's flower garden quilt. I think that's what they're called. So each one has a flower. Although these could be the next layer. But then I've only got 4. Ugh. I need to think about it, basically. But they are destined for the Hexie Puff blanket. The other yarn I bought from one of my favourite independent yarn stores in Brighton called Yak Yarn and Knitting, and it's this Studio Donegal soft Donegal, and it's Aran weight, worsted. Let's not get into that again. But anyway, I've been to Donegal and it's 100% merino, but it's chunky and tweedy, and I really liked it, and I bought this because I wanted to make a modern knitting pattern, which the name has escaped me of, bear with. It's the Over It Slipover by Lily Kate France. And this is, like I said, it's a modern design, and it's just one of those things, when I saw it, I'm just intrigued by how it's made. I follow Lily on Instagram, and I don't know if you know the story, she's sort of been a published knitwear designer since she was 12 or something like that, I don't know. But she has such sophisticated knitting techniques in her patterns, and I like to try and find patterns that will challenge me, where I'll learn something new. And as much as I love to make vintage things, it is nice sometimes to delve back into that modern knitwear design and the style of it, because the construction is so different, and it just makes a change for me to have a new challenge. And when I saw this design, I thought, that is something firstly I want to wear, and I am so intrigued by the lines of it, by the shaping, that I want to make it, basically. And it's not so modern that it won't look out of place with other items in my wardrobe, and I am trying to be a bit more conscious about what I choose to make fitting with the whole, particularly if I'm buying new yarn, which the past 2 have been new yarns I've bought. Yeah, it's worsted weight yarn, and I'm really looking forward to getting onto some different knitting projects once I finally finish the endless knitting of my ranunculus dress, which I am still going on. But I think before I make that one, or any of the other ones I've talked about, there's something else I want to make. So I bought all of these, and I have indeed made a swatch. Ta-da! Just fell off the bed. So I've already made a swatch, because I want to use this to make the Moan cardigan by my dear friend Micah from Engineering Knits. Are you surprised? And the reason I wanted to make this one is I see Micah wear her version all the time and I love it, but also I don't have that many vintage cardigans in my wardrobe, and I do like a cardigan, but I tend to like my cardigans on the chunky, cosy side, whereas I like my sweaters on the lightweight 1940s side. So I'm sort of hoping that this cardigan will fit a sort of gap I have in my wardrobe for like, cozy, warm, comfy kind of knitwear. And that's the reason I went for the DK Elements, because this is a wool lyocell blend, which is viscose, but it's one of these sustainably produced viscoses in a closed loop. So I don't know if you know how viscose is made. So viscose is made using wood pulp, and they chemically treat the wood pulp to produce these long cellulose fibres, and then those are spun or woven into rayon or viscose. But the issue with that is it's a very chemically intensive process, and traditionally the chemicals post-product are just dumped. But these new branded types of viscose, Tencel, Lyocell, there's another one that I can't think what's called. Anyway, they've invented this closed loop process whereby they just keep reusing the same chemicals. So once it's treated, I don't know how, but they recycle it. So they can keep using the same bunch of chemicals over and over, and it doesn't then end up in the environment. I don't know if that makes it less energy intensive to produce, but it is a more sustainable form of viscose. And I'm really pleased to see an option, because viscose yarn is often sort of marketed as like vegan yarn, which I'll get onto that another day. But this does have a wool blend, and it's Falkland Islands wool. I used this to make a little amigurumi Grogu yes, Grogu from The Mandalorian as a Christmas present. And I only got it because it was the only one in the shop that was the right colour, but it was a joy to work with. And I remember thinking to myself, I want a jumper out of this because it has the properties of wool that I like, but it's so soft and cosy, and it has a slight sheen as a result of the viscose. And I like that, but it's not appropriate for everything I make, and I don't think it would be appropriate for some of the 1940s knits I've made. But there is a very famous version of the rainbow jumper that's in the collection of the Knitting and Crochet Guild, which is made entirely from rayon yarn, which is very shiny. And rayon yarns, which is a type of viscose, were very popular in the 1940s. So I did think actually this would be good for some, not all, but some vintage knits, which is why I want to use it for my Moan cardigan. And this is the one I want to make next, because I would like a DK weight project. I would also like something with a bit more interest with the colour work, because I'm knitting in the round for the ranunculus. I'm over it. I am over it. I'm very nearly done though, so I think this is going to be the next project I cast on. So I thought I would also do an update on my works in progress. So I am still working away on the daisy blouse. I am getting closer, but I am also not rushing it, because as you have probably seen if you've been following along with my short series, I keep making mistakes, and I won't say that I've lost motivation to work on it, because that's not true. I am stubborn enough that I will get it finished, but I've learned that forcing myself to work on it is not going to get it finished, because all that happens is I lose concentration and I make mistakes. So I'm just doing little bits at a time, and sometimes that's like joining two daisies. We're getting to an interesting point, so I might do a little bit to include in the next stash busting update in long form format rather than short form format to explain that, because I do think it is just incredible, the construction of this piece. I mean, it's wacky, but it is interesting, so that you can see that as well, because I appreciate a lot of people have become very invested in this project. Perhaps more so than me at this point, but I am working on it. The only other work in progress I have still active is my Weldon's Pretty Gloves, which I think are going to be too small, and I keep putting off sewing them up. So I need to just do it and check, because they might block to be bigger, or they might stretch to be bigger because it's a cable pattern. But also knitting those fingers on double pointed needles, just so fiddly, those little quantities. And that's why I don't want to unpick them, because I'm just going to end up with like loads of tiny little balls of wool. So I will eventually get round to finishing those, I think, and then I'll just give them to somebody with small hands if they don't fit, because I have quite long skinny hands. And I haven't yet frogged all those projects I said I would frog and skeined up that yarn, because I had enough of winding yarn after I wound everything up the other day. I was not going to start unwinding yarn to rewind. That's still on my to-do list. Do I have the energy for that today? No, I have to go out this evening. Good pacing. Yes, well done. Well done, Claude. I am a quarter of a skein away from being under 100. Yes, I had to do a little bit of doctoring the terms of what counts as my stash to get there. But this has been a really useful exercise over the past nearly 2 years. I feel so much more engaged with my stash, so much more aware of what I have, so much better in tune with what I like to make and what I like to knit. And so the yarns that I have bought, I feel really confident are not only going to get made up and not just sit there languishing being moth food for eternity, but also that the pieces I'm going to make are going to be pieces that I like and enjoy. I know quite a few people were sad that I didn't finish the Intarsia 1940s blouse that I was making from the remnants of making this blouse, but I just realised that I don't need another grey, black, cream and red 1940s blouse in my wardrobe. I have this one that I like, that I wear, that I prefer. So why make that other one when I could put that yarn to better use? I have also had to accept that my body is a different shape and size now, and so a lot of the projects that I half finished might not fit me, or probably won't fit me, and I might not have enough yarn to finish them. And that's difficult, but it's a part of it. Oh well, that is one of the benefits of knitting, is that you can rip it out and reuse the yarn much more easily than you can do that with fabric. So like that Victorian corset, I do still want to make it because I find it so interesting, but I'm not going to wear it because I'm not doing that sort of costuming anymore. I have all these dilemmas still going around in my head, but I have fewer dilemmas thanks to the stash busting process. So my next goal, because I like setting goals, seeing as now we're at 125, I think I would like to get to under 50. Or do I want to get to the point... I almost want to get to the point where I have a bag of yarn for mending, my bag of like stash for archive purposes, and nothing else. And everything I buy is just for the project I want to work on, or for projects that I have a pattern in mind for and I've bought enough yarn. I don't know whether that's realistic, because you always end up with odd bits, don't you? But I am feeling a lot better about donating or selling my stash to make space for things that I actually want to make. She says, stroking the emotional support duck. And if you have no idea what the emotional support duck is, then you should watch this video where I make the 1940s version of the emotional support chicken known as Douglas the duck. Thanks for watching. See you next time.